swooning for some jazz.
Let Nothemba Madumo serve you up some jazz and beyond.
On 702 and CapeTalk.
It is Jazz and Beyond on 702 and CapeTalk with me, Nothemba. And of course, we always have these amazing guests who tell us all the stories behind the music, which not only matters, but also as much as the notes also matter. And our guest today is all the way from the heartbeat of Puerto Rico. And he has gone to the global stages of jazz music. It's an artist who carries not just in his sound, but also in his spirit, the heritage of his, home country and home city. And also, we're going to have a lovely conversation with David Sanchez, and explore his latest album, which is called Tambó. And a brilliant saxophonist, might I add. I know you call yourself David. Is it David or is it David? We all say David, and you say David. How are you?
How you doing, man? First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to your program. You know, it's an honor. Anyway, I'm excited. You know, but yeah, my name is David. That's the way we pronounce it in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
And it's just yeah, but you know, you could call me however you feel better.
No, I want to call you in your proper pronunciation, so that it touches your soul when I call you. It reaches where it should be. Listen, an absolutely amazing album called Tambó. Tell me what the title means first of all, before we get into the music.
Well, the title basically it means the drum, you know, the hand drum, you know, tambó. Tambó obviously is the Caribbean way and Afrocentric way of saying tambor. Is the word in Spanish, but all Afro descendants, you know, like this, how you call it, it's like from ancient, you know, like time, you know, from the very early stages, you know, of Afro descendants, you know, coming, bringing, you know, the slave trade, you know, and adapting to different languages. We adapted our own way of and our own cadence and accents to pronouncing, you know, our colonists' languages. So instead of tambor, which is the word, is tambó, you know, which is closer to like it would be. It's away from being from the word Spanish, you know, in a way, you know, it sounds like it gives an accent, a different accent to it.
Tambó. Well, I guess I'm not surprised because you started off, you know, with the percussions, because before you went into the saxophone, and in a lot of your music, the history, the rhythm, and the Caribbean spirit is always there in the foreground, so to speak. This was probably very intentional with this album, because my goodness, when I was listening to the music, the percussions were just like, oh my goodness. Were they an intentional as a focal in grounding the music of this album?
Most definitely, yeah. It was all intentional. I wanted to, you know, I had different objectives with this recording. You know, one was to tell. The first one was to tell a story. The story of two stories. One, the stories of how I feel as an Afro Latino, and the attempt of the continued desire to find out and discover more about where I come from, beyond Puerto Rico, beyond Puerto Rico. And so because I do understand, and I have this pretty clear in many ways, is that this is a process for us, as Afro descendants in Latin in the Americas, throughout the Americas, United States of America, North America, Central America, Caribbean, and South America, because we were displaced. So therefore, and separated in many different ways. So therefore, our story can't. It's I never felt like my history and our story as people, and it's never going to be complete unless I really know and travel and see other Afro descendants, in throughout the Americas. You know what I mean? Uh, in other words, the African diaspora in throughout the Americas. So in this particular case, that's one objective, right? That's one. I'm like, a Carib. In my last recording, this is like the second volume of, I would say, of that project that I started. I decided to call it Carib, and started with
That's
Haiti.
the one that won the Grammy, of course. Yes.
No. It was nominated for it. It
Nominated. Oh
didn't
no.
win the Grammy, but yeah,
It's
nominated.
it's
Yeah.
as good
But
as it's as good as winning. Don't worry.
yeah, right, exactly. So basically, that one was also using obviously using my perspective as an Afro Puerto Riqueño, Afro Boricua, Afro Puerto Rican. So usually using that as an anchor, of course, because that's where I was born, that's where I grew up. But I used that as an anchor, and then in the first volume of this series of recordings, the focus was Puerto Rico, Afro-Puerto Rican, different Afro-Puerto Rican traditions, musical traditions with Haiti, specifically Congo-Guinea tradition. So, and then this second one, which is called Tambó, is the same thing, the same anchor, the same perspective as a Puerto Rican, but finding out the incredible, traditions of the Afro descendants in a place called San Basilio de Palenque, Colombia, and they were basically, if not the first, probably the first Afro descendant sovereign, freed a community town, and it's almost 200 years before Haiti. A lot of people don't know that, and it's a fascinating story. It was probably 1602, 1603, around beginning of the 1600s. These slaves, runaways, or maroons, however you want to call them, put a resistance against the Spaniards, and they were led by the amazing. Their leader was Bencos Bioho. Bencos Bioho went to the mountains and basically gathered and put an army of runaways or maroons, cimarrones in Spanish, and they won. So the Spaniards actually gave, conceded, and they've been recognized as their own territory. Still belong to Colombia, but they have their own rules, their own, everything is their own. So it's 200 years before Haiti. So the story for me was fascinating alone, that story. But beyond that, the music, it's like, there are so many parallels with the music, but yet so many differences as well. And it fascinates me. Just same with Haiti, because some of the traditions that have been inspired. This is all original compositions, of course.
Yeah.
But it's inspired by the story, and and obviously by some of these traditions, melodically, rhythmically, it's amazing because going back to, it's a self discovery for me because wow, look, the more I got into it, then you start realizing, wow, some of these traditions, the music had a very specific purpose. Sometimes they're extremely similar rhythmic traditions,
Mm-hmm.
and but they have uh, perhaps they call with a different name, and or sometimes they have similar names, or not exactly the same name, but they use for the same purposes, and that's one thing that that also I've been focusing. It's like, wow, music indeed had a purpose. It's not like now that I say, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the plane, you know, I'm listen to some music, and it still has a purpose, the purpose of relaxation, or the purpose of, you know, just distracting yourself, and you know,
Mm.
it's an entertainment kind of thing, or you feel a certain mood and it fits that purpose, right? But
Yeah.
before, you know, for our ancestors, they had a beyond that. Like, so if there was a funeral, there, you know, they had certain kind of music. If you do, there was, if you were watching close, you know, and the music was, you had to be the music. It was not like music being played for you necessarily.
Mm. Mm.
So you had to be the music. So that's the other thing. I'm like, wow, man, that's amazing. So the music has had an extremely important role in ourselves as uh, as a species, but in this case, music was um, uh, beyond having a purpose. The main purpose, one of the main purposes in this case, was a way of survival, a
Mm.
way of existence, a way of maintaining who you are when you were taking everything away.
Yes, and a way of obviously connecting with your, your fellow, people as well, and telling the stories through the art of music, and
Exactly.
I love the fascination that you have of the different rhythms and sounds of the diaspora and the Caribbean, because a lot of us tend to put a blanket description or maybe title to a sound that comes from the Caribbeans, or even South America, when in actual fact all of them have distinct sounds and rhythms because of their historic and cultural way. Just as also a lot of people mistake the continent of Africa to have one sound, when in actual fact there are so many different
Exactly.
rhythms and sounds which are obviously influenced by the cultures and the stories. And is this what you were trying to put into the album? Drawing from all these different uh, Afro-Caribbean and South American kind of sounds, and
Well,
which have probably you know um, helped you evolved in your music and influenced over time.
yeah, that's a very great question. Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, you, aside of what I described before, which is that self-discovery, almost, you know, like when you really, you know, are in the process of identifying all these musical traditions that speak to you in
Mm,
one way or the other. Because again, the fact that, you know, our ancestors were taking out, and they were, like, you're absolutely right, mainly from West Africa, you know, but bottom line is that there were different places in in West Africa, different countries.
mm,
So, and often, of course, with different languages, and often with different, you know, different ways. And yet, for you to be in a totally alien land, you know, and you will all put together, you have to figure something out,
yeah.
how to come together. And it's like a parallel. that I'm making, because I don't see the Caribbean. This is a contemporary Pan-African ensemble, the
Yes.
music,
Mm.
and it's beyond the Caribbean. That's the other. This recording it starts in part from the notion that as the Caribbean is a cultural expression rather than a geographical reference.
Aha. I get
So
it.
it's a
Mm.
cultural. This Caribbean is a cultural expression. You know, it's something that when you go to New Orleans, it's often it's not considered part of the Caribbean, but we call it the Caribbean. It's the northern part of the Caribbean.
Mm.
You
Mm.
breathe the Caribbean. You breathe that cultural. You breathe that. Um, eh, you breathe that cadence that happened to be origin happens to be Afro-descendant one. The cultural expression became that place,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's more of an Afro-diasporic. Uh, all these places, even when they're in South America, you go to Barranquilla, Colombia, or Palenque. That's what they call it, the Caribbean coast, or the greater Caribbean. In Venezuela, you know, all these places, Honduras, you know, they had the Garifunas, you know, and they all over the place, even Mexico, you know, and
Mm.
in Veracruz, all of those they breathe Caribbean. You know, that's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So it goes beyond a geographical reference, you know, of the Caribbean. That's one thing I have to say, and that's one of the main focus of the record. As a matter of fact, one song is called El Gran Caribe, which means the Greater Caribbean. You know, and
And
it refers to that. You know.
and it is one of my favorites. I was just about to now tell you my three favorites so far. The others are growing into me. That El Gran Caribe, definitely. Also, the Bencos Cimarrones. Am I saying it?
Y los cimarrones, yeah, yeah.
Cimarrones. And of course, Alma del Barrio. Ah, love, love, love those three tracks. Just tell me
Oh wow.
about some of the stories you're telling us in these songs.
Well, mira, El Gran Caribe, since we started talking about yeah, it was inspired with the same thing. You have all these elements that you have. You
Mm.
have the Caribbean, you know, I grew up there. I was born there in the Caribbean, the islands, right? But then you start traveling to these places they're outside, and you're like, I feel like this is the Caribbean. Just in base of the culture. I'm like, I'm home. You know, like I'm in New Orleans, I'm home.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I feel home. Or I'm in Honduras. You know, this feels like home. You know, it's like this is America, but you know, I feel like I could be in Puerto Rico and Cuba or the Dominican Republic. You
Mm.
know, and same it's a cultural expression embedded within the you know the community, you know, or the places themselves. In the case of same with South America, you know, you go from Venezuela to Colombia, different parts of the Caribbean, because Colombia is you know, you have all these places that have the sort of the mountain closer to the Amazonic, you know, the areas, and are totally different, you know. And then when you more move towards the coast, all of a sudden you breathe a different thing, you know. And is that and I guess that's what I call that Afro-diasporic expression, you know,
Mm.
and it will come together. It's amazing. But in the case of the Gran Caribe, that was, you know, it's trying to make an illustration and sounds of that sentiment. But in the case of Bencos y los Cimarrones,
Mm.
it was one of that piece is basically the mother piece of three pieces. It's a triptych, you know, like almost like in the museum when you go and you have the painting is in three, right? But it's one painting. So Bioho and El Magdalena is like that slow
Yes.
piece that you listen to here is part of that piece.
Ah.
It's three pieces in one. So Bencos y Los Cimarrones is the main piece, and Bencos is like a little. Uh, it's like basically reflection on the liberator, the leader, Bencos Bioho, which is the one that what I was telling a little earlier, that a person that helped liberate it and founded San Basilio de Palenque in 1603, 1602. He was one of the slaves that escaped and put the whole army together. And the Bencos y los Cimarrones means maroons, runaways. So Bencos y los Cimarrones is the main piece of that. And it's like a little story that I made up in my head that and these are true facts, but the Bioho, which is it was his last name, in a Magdalena, is the Magdalena River, the river in Colombia, the great Magdalena River, and that he was in that piece. It's called Bioho and El Magdalena. I'm basically I'm reflecting on him being carried in a ship and thinking how is he gonna escape,
Yeah.
and how is he gonna put a fight
Mm.
as happening. And then Bencos y los Cimarrones is the main piece, which is like this. It represents the struggle in the beginning to put the fight and to execute. And then Bencos Libertador is the piece that follows quickly.
The
Bencos y los
liberation.
Cimarrones
Yeah.
is the liberation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm understanding this, and what a beautiful way to through sound, to express that story and that history, and legacy, of course, which is also very, very important. And I would understand. I would imagine that, being able to bridge both these traditions and cultures with the innovation, of the sound of David Sanchez is must be a beautiful thing to balance as well, because you have taken the traditions of Puerto Rico into the jazz space, throughout the world, and of course the great people in jazz that have laid the foundation for that sound for you are people that you still honor today.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I have to say, I mean, that's the beauty of music too. Like you can, um, there's sounds that are in the air, and sounds that I believe, there's sort of like a memory, an extra memory that we carry, when we're born, and if 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 we pay attention in those moments of quiet, you can hear those sounds. I call it that it's almost an ancestral memory
Mhm.
to that we carry. We don't even, most of the times we don't even notice, but it's there. It's there, and music is just part of it.
Yeah, that's true. And talking about some of the mentors in jazz music, you got the likes of Eddie and Dizzy as some of the people that when you did move to the US, what was that like for you? Was it difficult to get into that space, and or were you just welcome because you're just a brilliant musician anyway? You would have walked in anyway.
Well, I don't know about the last one, but I gotta say that I have been
Mm.
very fortunate to to have these experiences. In the case of Eddie Palmieri, the great Eddie Palmieri, I it was unbelievable the way it happened. I mean, I was being always been very I was driven, with this. What is that? Is it to be a musician and to be able to serve a practitioner? Be serve meaning serve the people, with music, and it's almost like giving, it's therapy, in a way. So and being a practitioner of this art form, it's always really special to me, and I was just driven by trying to know and self this to discover more about myself. It's again, that music to help you find who we are. And in the case of Eddie, I've in the as I'm in that search and seeking, I remember I was it was my first year going into New Jersey, Rutgers University, but I was still living in Puerto Rico, and it was just a friend of mine, colleague and dear friend musician Charlie Sepulveda, trumpet player, was already playing with Eddie Palmieri, and they had this event in Puerto Rico. I happened to be in Puerto Rico at the time. It was a little recess, and so I was just gonna sob, and fill in the concert, and when I did it, it was incredible. I mean, the experiences and be with that such an iconic artist, and this to help shape and change the sound in the music for already over several decades. And for me, I just got into it, and of course, next thing when he found out that I was at Rutgers University and they were going back to New York, I was in New Jersey. I mean, he continue asking, man, wow, this guy, he liked the energy I put in there. So they started calling me, and that's how I started playing with Eddie. I was fairly young. I was like probably 19 years old, So, and actually, Eddie was definitely a way of getting the attention, and therefore later being able to join Dizzy Gillespie, because we crossed paths many times. So and some of the musicians that were playing at the time with Dizzy, they knew about me. So whenever I had an opportunity, they were like, kind of like checking me out, like this young guy is coming up, and when there was a situation that the right situation came when they needed saxophone player, and my name was in the came into the conversation with and eventually someone called me from DC's management, and I was I was shocked, because I definitely I was I couldn't believe it, I was like, this has to be a joke, but it was true, and that experience, one of the geniuses of music, and innovator, responsible for so many uh, uh, at least two extremely important periods in music.
Yeah.
So that, one is bebop and jazz, and the other one, obviously helping shape Caribbean sounds, from in this case, particular case specifically from Cuba, merging them with, jazz traditions, and beyond. So that experience was, as it was with Eddie, was unparalleled. It was just as a whole an incredible way of learning, and what the music, what art is all about, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that those two experiences, I have to say, after that I have to bless, once I got those, it was the foundation for me to do all these other things later, including other collaborations,
Yes.
and being able to work with artists, not on, from one like more from the coming from the jazz tradition, or more Afro-Latino, or traditions, and the great foundation also for to give me the courage to to tell my story
Yeah.
through music.
I'm just thinking, because you're also a respected educator, and often referred to as Maestro Sanchez. You're mentoring young musicians globally. Uh, what lessons, especially from Eddie and also Dizzy, that even up to today, in your, engaging with young people, those are still ingrained in you, and you share them in your education, lectures and workshops.
Yeah, well, one of them is to make sure they always knew, they always projected, and would tell you in so many ways the importance to know where you come from,
Mm-hmm.
who you are,
Mm-hmm.
in order to move on, forward. But you have to be rooted, know your where you come from, your roots, your tradition, in order to better understand where you're going to go in the future, as a whole. That's one thing both them had very clear.
Mm.
Both contemporary, all about a new perspective, a new sound, but all grounded in traditions. That's
Yeah.
something that is extremely important to me, to as an educator. You have to be aware of what came and why, what's the relationship,
Mm.
because the more you understand that, we understand that, the better, the more options we're going to have, and the better, uh, yeah, the better, we're going to have a better understanding as a whole, I better
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
where we want to, of the places we can go, we could go, so that's number one. And then on this number two, well, no, there's no number one, number two. That's one of them in terms of education per se,
Yeah.
but also as important, um, it just, what the music, the purpose of music. What's the music? Why do we play music? What's the purpose of it? What is it? Is it to give? Is your own ego? Is it, what is it? It's just to show that you play. No, there's a purpose in music, and the more clear we know and we understand what that purpose is, and
What is the purpose?
uh,
What is the purpose?
well, the purpose is to be serving. We serving. We giving. We tell, through our stories,
Mm.
right? We storytellers, right? And those stories have different shapes, different textures, different moods. Through music, that's our way of expressing ourselves,
Mm.
and and through that expression, we hopefully, inviting people to be in our journey, that whatever that's that we're trying to say, but getting them into something different, tuning in into the music. You are in a zone, and that zone brings so many different feelings. It could be like, happiness, or it's like photos that you could see, listen to a piece, and it reminds you a day that it was rainy,
Yeah.
or that it has a certain melancholic element to it, or happiness, or it's all these feelings,
Mm.
and but the bottom line is that you're on a trip, and within that trip, it's almost like you coming down, and you're in real, you are in reality, but at the same time it's surreal in terms of your feelings. You come down because all of a sudden all uh, you are all in within the music, yeah, and you become part of the music, which is what I was saying about the ancestors before. They were the music. It's not like they were listening to music and with the headphones, or no, they had to play the music, and they were the music themselves in order for the music to be played. So it's sort of like that in a different way, right? Like you're listening, but you become part of them, of that journey,
I
of
get
that
it.
expression, and therefore we like almost like a therapist. That this is like therapy. Giving people healing in some kind of ways, or inspiring people, or like pretty much like when you uh, read a story or see a movie and puts you in the zone. So but we serve at that purpose. We given some, ultimately we are, and they actually had that very clear. So you have to take the people, you have to give, so the people come, and you are, and basically we're together. The people are part of this, and they go into the journey that we're trying to go as well.
Yep.
And that's something that they both had very clear. Very, something very clear, like the humility we have to have. As what is it, what exactly we do. What is to be a practitioner of this art form. And it's a never ending self-discovery and learning experience.
Wow, that is beautiful, and I guess that is why even today we still talk about those musicians, and I'm really loving the fact that you stress to your students the importance of the cultural context as much as the music skill, and the traditions, that they need to carry forward into the next generation, which is what you're doing. I'm really curious though about your fascination with the color purple in your hair, in your album cover, in your what is going on, David?
I don't know. I always like the color, and I thought, what? I don't wear any purple. And then one day, I just say, what? I'm gonna wear purple. I always like the colors. So and I didn't never wear anything ever. And I'm like, man, I really like the color. And,
Yeah.
and then I took a little further.
Yeah, I hope you haven't painted your room purple as well.
No, 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 no,
You
no,
haven't
no,
gone that far.
not yet, not yet.
David, you've been touring for so many years globally. What still excites you about going around the world and touring? And maybe there are some things in your stories or experiences in your tours that have actually even influenced some compositions and the sound that you produce.
Oh that's a wide question, because
Yeah.
it's funny. I was just, as a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of this residency here at Berkeley Global. My dear friend, an amazing artist, educator, pianist, the great Danilo Perez.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Playing with he's the founder of the Berkeley Global Institute, the
Mm.
Global Institute, which means exactly that. Is being inclusive to all these ways. And bringing them together through music.
Mm.
And it's funny, we were talking about that yesterday at the forum. As a matter of fact, I had to get ready for that in a few
Few
minutes. But
minutes. Mm.
yesterday in that forum, everything ends with a forum. After all the classes and workshops and all that, and then you have the students and some of the faculty together. And then we started discussing that kind of in that question, in a way that where you asked that what you just asked me, And what I told them is like, in this case, we were talking about different experiences throughout. And when I moved from Puerto Rico to the United States, and then from the United States, and New York specifically, I started traveling. And how media in the 90s, when we were coming up, Danilo and I as young men, and also being a part of DC together. He was there a year and a half before me, so, and he helped me out a lot. So we were like that was an era where record companies were, it's like they were trying to revisit like a neo era of jazz, and then they call it the young lions. We were part of that generation. So they were marketing people. They were doing what they always done, which is try to put names or try to put people in boxes,
Yeah.
so that they could sell them, like in
Yeah.
compartments.
Yeah.
So that and then of course we were that Perez, Sanchez. So immediately it's okay, Latin jazz, like, and we were considered as like, that didn't come from the music itself. It comes from some writer that is trying to, that is some marketing team that is trying to tell a writer, this is the narrative that we want to create for these artists, and but it really doesn't come from ourselves. And then in the conversation, when I said, like, when you talk about the music, it's no different from us as our experiences in life as people. And in my case, once I got the opportunity, I was so blessed to travel for so long between Eddie, DC, and then some of the many other artists that I worked, and I have the chance to experience those different ways throughout the world, beyond Latin America, beyond the United States, going to Asia, going to Europe, going to all these different places. Obviously, you're gonna get, if we pay attention as humans, where we are, and we observant, and we see the dynamics, and even try to fit in
Yeah.
where we are, then most likely we're gonna grab something from that experience that is gonna stay. And that's exactly the same with music. The more you travel, the more you experience different ways and different of expression, that I consider that I take that with me. So it'll be unfair then to go 30 years later and say, yeah, I'm Puerto Rican music, because it's all Puerto. No, yes, that's my core. That's my core. That's my
Yeah.
anchor. Like that. That's it, because that's where I grew up. That's why I was born. But I have all this New York and beyond experiences. It'll be unfair to say that most of my life I've been traveling and getting all these flavors in know what are those,
And that they become part of
and
you.
not
They be,
yeah, not exactly, and not to acknowledge that they have been they have helped shape who am I today.
yeah. Yeah.
And that my idiosyncrasy is going to change in one way or the other through those experiences. So it's
True.
exactly the same thing. The
Yeah.
music is no different to me. Again, you have to be willing to be humble enough to see, to wanting to see something, wanting to interact, wanting to if you have that, then most likely you're gonna learn.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn, and you're gonna carry those experiences with you
Yeah.
in one way or the other.
And this is what makes your sound so rich and full, because of all these experiences and travels and influences as well. And I mean, talking about some of these experiences, I saw you post the other day, not long ago, you meeting up with Brentford Marsalis, and I'm thinking, okay, and you're telling the story of days back in New York, some of the people that have, played an important, as a saxophonist, I would believe, an important role in your career as well.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. We met around that period that I was coming up with Eddie. And first time I went to Europe, I had to refresh. And he thought that we met in the U.S. I was like, man, that's incredible. We met in France. And in Nice, and then from then on we had a connection. Because he had that type of always had that type of mindset too.
Yeah.
He doesn't see like music, as like this is just one thing, we played this, he sees it as a bigger picture it's like an ocean, and then just you have all, or better say, you have all these oceans. They call the Atlantic, the Pacific, this and that, and there's still water, and still put together, still comes together in one way or the other.
And there's still more. Yeah. And there's still more.
Yeah. So we connected like that, and of course, we were basically. It was was my first visit of a residency at the Hemispheric Institute in NYU University. It's a series of 3 visits. So that was the first visit, and it was incredible to share so many. It was an open conversation, and like kind of listening to some tracks, like almost like a lifetime soundtrack of that all that period. When we were growing up, as Bradford always was a mentor and very encouraging and influencer, and we collaborated in my album Obsession, and later, especially in that album called Melasa, and Melasa has a lot to do with what I'm doing right now, what I've been doing. Melasa really, that album really kind of, I would say it was it was a moment that came at the right time, that really established and kind of helped solidify everything that I've already had in me. But in Melasa, kind of all came together, and when we put it together, and it was so. But basically, that's what it was all about. That
beautiful. Beautiful. I remember that album Obsession. You were still very young then, but let's wrap it up by 2 questions. A very quick one. When you come up with an album, especially like this one, Tambó, whose opinion do you trust most to tell you how they feel about the project? Who do you test it with first?
Who do I trust? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
who do I trust?
When you finish a project like this one, Tambó, who do you send the music to and say, tell me what you think? Who do you trust?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Like, I guess some of the my peers, musicians that were involved also, it's like, man, what you think of this idea? What you think? And but then again, they too close because they were part of it. And but sometimes, actually, my wife is a great reference because she has like a real wide palette, musical palette. Meaning, like, it could be like something folkloric, like roots music, to like rock and roll, to like obviously music from the Caribbean, blues. She's super into like Delta blues, not not like real blues, jazz, and so I trust someone that has all these different ways, and it has a big palette when it comes to ears. Have experience and enjoys all these different ways of playing and expression. So I trust that. I play, once it's ready, I was like, well, I'll play and see what it is. So I trust her ears. And then again, I don't play it a lot. I figure
when it's done, it's done. It's done. It's done. There's no.
Well, that too, because it's like, well, this is this is how I this is how I felt with this story.
Yeah.
This is the story I have to tell. Is this one, and it might some people might like it, some people might not, but it's still the story I want to tell, and the story I'm feeling. That is
Yeah.
how I'm feeling right at this given time and moment.
I got you. And the last question is, what do you want us to take out of this album, Tambó? When we listen to it. Um,
Well, hopefully, I want to take you in one way in your own journey, whatever, however you feel, however the songs make you feel, to make you fly, make you go just there and beyond my own story, because you can't listen to Venkos and I just broke down what all these songs are, the story behind all of them, what
yes.
I meant, what I was feeling. But then you close your eyes and perhaps you find yourself going somewhere else. And hey, if you do, I'll be happy. I'll tell
No,
you that.
and it definitely happened. I so loved the bassist, oh my goodness, and your pianist, and of course the percussionist was just a cherry on top. Not mentioning, of course,
Yeah.
your saxophone sound as well. But I must say, the musicians you have on the album are amazing. Is this your regular band, or was it just for the special project?
Yeah, no. This I mean, except for the exception of adding the percussionist, from Colombia, I wanted to add that element with the actual instruments too.
Mm,
The roots instruments. I wanted to make that point very clear, because they have their own sound and different and their own texture. So obviously the guest Franklin Tejedor, great. His nickname is Lamparita. He plays with las Estrellas del Caribe, a great band, from Palenque, and he was a very important component on this, for that other part, right? The Afro-Colombian. So it's not like he's part of the band, but
mm,
he was a guest for this thing. The
ah,
rest of the guys, I do play with them on and off, not in different configurations. Sometimes quintet, sometimes sextet, but they're more part of the regular band.
no, they are just amazing on this album as well.
Luis Perdomos on piano,
Hmm.
Ricky Rodriguez on bass, uh, Tony Escapa on drums, Camilo Molina on barrels and percussion, and Jan Lia Ponte on also on percussion.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant stuff. Absolutely. I'm glad you are the
Thank
one
you.
running out those names, because I wouldn't have managed to do that. It's such a pleasure talking to you, David. And thank you so much for taking the time, and wishing you all the best. And hope maybe one day you'll come and perform here in South Africa. And not
Oh,
only.
thank you so much, Nothemba, and it's a really indeed a pleasure. Last time I was there was several years ago, maybe I don't know, maybe like 9 years ago or
Uh-huh.
seven, something like that. I when it was Johannesburg, but before no, I'm sorry, it was. And wow, it's incredible. And the fest, I did that, but it's been too long.
Yeah,
I need to be back in South Africa. I need to. I
absolutely.
need to. We're gonna work towards that goal.
That
I
would
would
be
love to be there again.
that would be great. And bring your all purple with you. Okay.
Okay, I will. I will.
Come for the jazz and stay for the good times
On Jazz and Beyond with Nothemba Madumo.
on 702 and Cape Talk.